Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the hand claps. That makes me feel encouraged already. Yeah, I just want to actually express gratitude that we discussed yesterday. I think Mikey said an attitude of gratitude will determine your level of altitude. I love that. I'm very fond of wise quotes, actually. And one of my favorite books actually is the book of Proverbs, which is a biblical book, and it's full of life lessons, and I can listen to that over and over and over again. And so today, I was actually scrolling through Facebook, I could do, and I saw a quote that really sort of spoke to me, and I've been mentally chewing on it for quite a long time. And so when Mike gave me this opportunity to share, I thought I would bring it to the room, and hopefully it will stimulate discussion in the room. So I'm going to do that. But again, thank you, Mike. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, everybody here. You all inspire me greatly, and I really do appreciate you all. Okay, so I'm going to try and share a screen. My topic for today is your perception is your, and when I was scrolling through Facebook, this caught my attention, and I've chewed on it for about 4 weeks now. Your perception is your reality. How do you see yourself? What is perception? What is reality? On Sunday, I was listening to a speaker, and she was talking about her son, and her son is 3 years old. And she said, she described her son as an alpha male. And she said, she asked him to pray for her. And he said, God, make my mom's arms as strong as mine, right? So he basically doesn't see himself like the little cat. He sees himself already at the age of 3 as a tiger. There's an inner confidence in him that makes him feel that his arms are stronger than his mom's. So I thought that was quite interesting. Another story, my dad is in his late 80s, but he's never let age be a factor in his life. And in his late 70s, he was running a business, and I was supporting him with it. And we got onto the tube, and there was those seats that fold down at the front. And I said, oh, Dad, you can sit there. And he said, oh no, if I sit there, an old person will come, I'll have to get up and give them my seat. So I was like, so his perception of himself was old, you know, and I didn't want to discourage that. So I said, okay, let's go and sit somewhere else. So before I actually get deeper into exploring this statement, I want to ask people in the room, anybody in the room, seeing this statement, your perception is your reality, and seeing the image, what does it say to you? What's your view of it? I just want to... Okay, so before we get further into it, let's have some definitions. My background is lecturing. I used to be a law lecturer. So I always like to say to them, let's look at a definition and then dig deeper into it and dissect it. Let's start from somewhere and build on it. So I'm not saying this is the perfect definitions, but these are some definitions to help us to move further into the discussion. So perception then is the process of getting, interpreting, selecting, and organizing sensory information. So sensory information, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell, what we touch, how we process it, how we interpret it, how we select it. That is what perception is about. Essentially, it's about what is true for you. I think I've heard a lot when people say, speak your truth, speak your truth. And that's what it's about. Sometimes it's about not necessarily what is truth, but what you perceive to be true by the way you've processed information and the way you selected it and how you've organized it in your mind. Whilst reality is about objective truth and fact. what is actually true and what is fact. There's no disputing it. It's truth, it's fact. It's not about interpretation. It actually is literally what it is. It's fact. Okay. So when you're saying your perception is your reality, what you see and what you process becomes actual truth, but it might not be actual truth. And sometimes if it's not actual truth, it may be positive or may be negative for you. So if I think about my own life, when I was at school, I was in a school where they streamed you in 3 ways, 3 levels: bottom level, middle level, top level. Bottom level, you were not going to be entered for any exams where you could even achieve a grade D. Middle level, you'll only be entered for exams where your highest grade would be a C. Top level, all the grades are open to you. You're expected to achieve between A to C. And so you were streamed right from the first year through to when you left. And I was streamed into the middle band, the average band. And so throughout all my schooling, you were told you're average, you know, you're not going to be really able to achieve higher grades. So this is the limit. This is how far you can go. And the people at the top will look down at people in the middle. People in the middle will look down at people at the bottom. So I used to say, at least I'm not at the bottom. I'm average. And so my teachers would say, no, you're not really going to be able to do A levels. And so I just kind of accepted that. And when I started school, I grew up in a high-rise council flat in Battersea. So shout out to the South Londoners. And my mom had 2 cleaning jobs, and she would say, lock the door. When I lock this door, don't open it out to anyone. And so it was I grew up with being fearful, being cautious about people. And she would say, don't tell anybody our business. So, what we say in the house stays in the house. And I was the oldest sibling of 4. So I was very mature. So I was cooking, cleaning, looking after my siblings. I didn't really see myself as a child, actually. I saw myself already as an adult because I was taking on the role of an adult. And even my first day at school, my mom gave me one of her old blouses, one of her skirts, and bought me shoes that were too big for me so that I could grow into them, so that she wouldn't have to buy shoes too early. So, I kind of had the perception of, well, you just take what you get. That's life. Don't complain about anything. And I went through school with people bullying me and saying, you're less than. I remember there was a time actually where some girls in my class handed me a piece of paper and they said, we've done a survey and we've decided that you are the ugliest girl in the room. And I saw it and I didn't cry. I just thought, I'm not going to give them the satisfaction, but it really sank into me and it just made me feel like I was worthless. And it wasn't until the final year of secondary school, no, the year before the final, we had a supply teacher. It was a black lady. Most of my teachers were white. So I thought she was so dynamic and she just seemed to appreciate everyone and bring out the best in people. And she said to me, let me see your exam entries. And she said, why have you not been entered for any higher papers? And I said, that's just the way it is. And she said, actually, I see something in you. I see a flame in you. What I'm going to do, I'm going to meet you Saturday morning. I'm giving you an exam paper to do. I'm going to meet you Saturday morning outside Debenhams. You give me the paper, I'll mark it. And on Monday, if you've passed, I'm putting you in for a higher paper. So I didn't cheat. I did the exam and I passed. And she put me in for the higher paper. And that woman ignited something in me and changed my perception of myself. And I began to think, actually, maybe I could do more. And so, I went on to do A-levels. And one of the A-levels that I did was A-level law. and I just really loved the subject. I didn't see myself as a future lawyer, but I did well in the subject, so I got a grade A in it, and I was like, oh, then maybe there's something here. And I went on to do a law degree, and went on to become a law lecturer. So her input into my life, my perception of myself. So a question I want to ask is, how do you change someone's perception? Looking at this image here, who's right? Well, when I look at it, I think that actually they're both right. But it's just they're looking at it from a different stance. One says it's 6 because from where he's standing, it's 6. The other says it's 9 because from where he's standing, it's 9. But both of them will argue that the other is wrong, because what they perceive is dependent on where they're standing. And your perception of reality, of what's real, is very much shaped by your upbringing, your friends, your family, perhaps your spouse, your schooling, your level of education, your faith, your religion. It's shaped by so many things to make you take a stance where you are now. And it happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight. And so sometimes it becomes very entrenched. It creates what's true for you. And sometimes you want to hold on to that sense of what's true until somebody comes and challenges that. So for these two individuals, they strongly believe that what they perceive is truth. And you could argue that they're both right in their current perceptions from where they're standing. But if they'd maybe moved from their position and maybe stood on the other side, they'd see why the other person perceived the thing the way they did. So how you perceive something does affect your behavior. And you have to ask yourself, have I got a distorted perception of life? What has caused that distortion? Sometimes if we face trauma in our life, our perception of reality becomes warped, and we see things in a way that actually may not be true. So for me, when I was growing up, I just thought no boy is going to like me because I've been told I'm ugly. And I remember walking to school. I used to go to a school called Garrett Green. It's called Burntwood now. And there was a boys' school called Ernest Bevan. And the boys used to walk down the hill and the girls used to walk up the hill. And we did this. And these 4 boys would pass us, my group of friends. And one day they decided to stop and talk. And I immediately thought, they're going to attack me. They're going to say I'm horrible. So when you feel like you're being attacked, you either go into flight or fight mode. And I literally went into flight mode. I ran away and I didn't speak to them. And that was because I had a perception that they're going to just say what everybody else is saying, and I didn't want to hear it. But maybe that wasn't the reality. The reality is they were maybe interested in me. So it's very important to check, is our perception of life, what's true for us, is it really true? Or has it been distorted in any way? I think it's important, even now as we're in a period of lockdown, we've got time to reflect on our perceptions and where they came from. And I would say you have to address any possible distorted perception of yourself or others head on. I would say don't be defensive, but maybe ask yourself, am I seeing things the way they really are or not? And in order to perhaps see something in a different light, you might need expert help. You might need, when I say expert help, it might be that you need the help of a counselor or the help of a mentor or the help of a religious leader. It's up to you. But we've all got blind spots, and sometimes you may not realize that your perception is actually quite distorted and is hindering you from fulfilling your full potential. So me personally, I got to a place in my life where I realized that I had a tendency to be a rescuer. And I stumbled upon the concept of being codependent, and I realized that I kind of was in that. I found myself in cycles of codependency where I was the rescuer. And I think it stemmed right back from my childhood, where the expectation of me was to be the rescuer. And I carried that through in my adulthood, but I was losing myself when I kept doing that. And I kept thinking, I keep sacrificing myself, but I don't know why I'm doing this. And I don't feel happy. And so I actually did go to a counselor and talked about a lot of things. But one day I told her, look, I need you to help me to know what this whole work-life balance is. I'm burning myself out. And she just said to me, were you ever appreciated when you were young? And I said, what do you mean? She said, you know, when you got your A level, for example, was it ever appreciated? And I said, or celebrated? And I said, no, not really. It was like, yeah, you've done it, move on to the next stage. And she said, could it be that you are driving yourself like this because you want to be seen? You want someone to maybe celebrate you for once. And maybe you need to start celebrating yourself. You know, and for me, that was really insightful, that I didn't have to keep wanting, you know, looking for people to affirm me. I could affirm myself. So that really helped me. In order to change perception, it's important to gather as much evidence as possible to challenge your worldview. So it would may mean looking at things from the viewpoint of others. How do others perceive me? Why do they perceive me that way? Where did I get this thinking from? You know, it's about asking questions. And it's also about being patient with yourself, because it took time to form that particular perception of yourself, and it will take time for that perception to change, especially if that perception is negative and you want it to change. It's going to take time. Also, one last thing I would say is that be careful about how you perceive yourself, because sometimes you could say, okay, then that means I should think positively about myself. That means I believe I can fly. I believe, you know, I'm going to burst into song in a minute, but you know, you may have these grandiose views about who you are, and then it might be so far removed from reality. So you've got to check that, you know, is this realistic? Is this too far removed from reality, or is it reality, what I'm thinking about here? Some people, you hear about anorexics who suffer from body dysmorphia, where they look into a mirror and they see themselves as fat, even though they're, you know, so thin. So perception, if you can go into extremes, and in those situations, then you really need professional help. So lastly, all I would like to say is your mindset can either, can either be the greatest strength or your greatest pitfall. And I'm going to leave that as a statement for people to think about. What's your mindset? Is it your greatest strength or your greatest pitfall?